Thank you so much for that talk. I loved it.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you.
Awesome. That was mind-blowingly good. How about that?
Mind-blowingly works.
Yeah, I remember complaining at you about some of this stuff when I was having some of these problems as a manager, and it is so good to hear this out loud, I gotta say.
It has taken many years of refining it, and I kind of look forward to coming back at some point and maybe talking about the things I learned since I wrote this talk, because I continue to experiment with these things and be proved wrong over and over again. So it's kind of refreshing to keep iterating on it.
Which is the name of the game, isn't it?
It is indeed.
All right, let's get some questions. First of all, how does complexity and difficulty factor into the decision-making, the matrix, the Eisenhower matrix?
Yeah, that's a great question. That matrix is a very coarse-grained matrix for sure, and it's not the thing that you would use to actually prioritize your work. What I do is I use that as a very rough rubric to figure out what kind of work that I'm looking at, right? And but there is definitely this idea of, hey, there is high-impact work that can be done that's very small, that, for instance, might be a political win for the team, right? It might be better for me to write a self-service tool to solve a problem, but if a user needs a thing and I'm expecting a thing from that user and it would take some 5 minutes of toil to do it, that might be a valuable task to do now. And that's one of the reasons I think it's so important to track these tasks and have open communication around the team about what we're doing, because a lot of times those tasks come in via DM, right? And we do them based on whether we have time or whether we know how to do it, or if person is in. That's the wrong reason to do it. There may be a right reason to do it, right? But we should be conscious about actually opting into that work. So yes, I do think complexity is a big deal, and particularly when looking at the Scrum team, it's super important when forming your backlog to have a blend of stories in your sprint that actually deliver a coherent user experience.
That ties perfectly into the next question, which is, when you split a team in two, do you cover each other's topics in stand-ups?
Yeah, so I'm still split on whether splitting the team is the right move. But the bet, particularly as it grew, whether or not that would have scaled. But at the size that we were at, what we did was sort of treat the SRE team as the first line of product feedback for the platform team. So in other words, they were the users that were most likely to experience issues that developers would hit, and then be able to articulate those problems in ways that platform team could understand. They also were well positioned to be able to prototype solutions, right? So, as an SRE, you can write part of platform. It's not like only platform team gets to contribute to that code base. And you're the person with the best knowledge to be able to pair with the right developer and the right platform person to make that happen. So yeah, I do think it's important that it be treated as one big team. It's whether or not you do stand-ups together depends on the nature of the work and how mature your operations and signaling are around your platform. Probably at a small size, it makes sense. If you can get your platform up to the maturity that it's performing like EC2, and I as a user can find out about the status going to a page or an update page, I may not need you in my daily stand-ups to inform what it is that I'm doing. So I would say it's include people in your ceremonies based on how much information in the for them to be there.
You're cutting out a little bit. Can you repeat that last bit?
Oh dear. Is this a little bit better?
Yes.
Okay. Last bit. So what I would say is choose to be in ceremonies based on the information you, right? So if your platform is well instrumented, if that stuff is really visible via dashboards and blog posts, then maybe you don't need to be in stand-ups every day because that status is visible. If it's not visible, good to be in the same room.
Nice. All right. And then on time estimates, we are just going straight into all the Scrum stuff, which is where I know as an ops manager, I was just completely flabbergasted over and over how it could just not work so badly. So on time estimates, people tend to use the amount of time they want to spend on something rather than the amount of time it should take.
Yes.
How do you phrase that to get the best answer?
So I don't think that time estimates are ever right. I don't really believe in my own ability to estimate time, and I certainly don't have people's ability to estimate time. What I do have confidence in is a couple things. I have the confidence in my ability to observe progress, and I have my confidence in my ability to identify questions that need to be answered to reduce complexity, right? So if you look at a Scrum team and you look at the software delivery process, right, the return on investment from a new Scrum team on a new project is like an S-curve. There's an initial couple sprints where you're just finding things out. It's all discovery, right? And then after that point, you know some things. And then I can say, okay, it's going to take me a week to do this and a week to do that. So the trick is getting the questions that you need to answer up front so that you can make a commitment that you think is relatively well informed and then meet that commitment. And if you can't make a commitment, then the answer is do an experiment, have a spike in your story sprint, right? So like the idea is that, and then if I see something that's moving, right? If I, as the manager, see a ticket that hasn't moved, I go and talk to that person, because it's not that they're not working on it. It's probably that the task is more complex than we scoped. And at that point, the right thing to do is to rescope the ticket, split the ticket, agree about what we're going to do, and move on. But the reality is there's always going to be excess scope. And the best thing that we can do is try and get the questions up front and answer them as a group so that you don't have some engineer like hammering on the keyboard at 11 o'clock at night trying to make product decisions about how many interfaces they should refactor right now. Oh, you were still
so many.
Oh, there you go.
So many murder mysteries in our infrastructure sometimes. We got 4 minutes, and so last question probably is there an opportunity or path to moving away from the Scrum DevOps methodology to see if there's better ways to manage, especially on infra teams? I suspect this person has... I was watching a show where there was like a detective, and I'm like, oh, being a detective is much more like being in operations, whereas producing something is far more of the platform side. So anyway, your thoughts on how to adjust methodology so that it actually does work on infra teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think an infra team can be a Scrum team. I don't think Scrum is perfect or ideal, and I mean, you should only be as Scrummy as it makes sense for your team to be, right? There's some people that do like all forms of extreme programming, and they don't need, right? I mean, there's lots of different methodologies approaching this. I like Scrum because it speaks the language of the business. They generally want things in Jira, they want things by milestones, right? And so it makes it easy for me to translate my team into their environment. But for sure, with that SRE team, they're not in Scrum, they're in Kanban, right? Because the difference between Scrum and Kanban is really based on what it is that you're trying to control for, right? In Scrum, what you're saying is I have a scope that I want to achieve, and I want to not maximize, but get a consistent engineering throughput for my team. In Kanban, you're saying I have no control over the tasks that are going to come in. All I have to control is work in progress. I have the amount of resource that I'm going to make available, and then you can order the queue for me, and that's all we can do. So depending on the type of work, one or both of those may be appropriate. I think the thing that's hard is working in both models at the same time, which just breaks everybody's brain, and what ends up happening is Kanban is the world because the Scrum board is treated like your email box, which ultimately gets like disregarded.
Because we're always chasing that dopamine of helping someone. All right.
Exactly right.
Thank you so much, Eric. This has been a fabulous talk. I'm going to throw out a couple of informational things for our attendees. So, one, you should check out our sponsors, especially Cloudsmith and Stackhawk, because we have some swag boxes and Nintendo Switch raffles, which I think could be very interesting to some people. And also, after Aaron's talk is lunchtime. During lunchtime, should you be so inclined, we are going to be streaming some DevOps party games. Check out the channel in the Discord to figure out how to watch us basically play a bunch of really fun Jackbox party games with DevOps prompts. I'm sure the sass will flow freely, and we will all get that nice harangued sysadmin humor that we all love. I don't know how to end this now. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Eric.